Premiere Pro is a robust program. It has a lot of tools and a lot of features, and to some people starting out, it can be a little intimidating. But the core of what it does, just editing video, is not that complicated and doesn't require very many tools. So I want to do a video that I consider a foundation. And really what I want to do is go over about 4 things that I think everyone should know about Premiere Pro. And they're the things that if you get comfortable with them, I think it's a license to learn. You can just figure out a lot of things. I want to note there's a lot of useful content on LinkedIn Learning. 2 that I recommend, and I'll put the links in the description, are one called Learning Premiere Pro, which is sort of LinkedIn's version of the basics. And then the really deep dive is called Premiere Pro Essential Training. And that's where they go over every single tool in detail. And these are really useful, really targeted. You can search for what you need. Okay, so the first point I want to make is that Premiere Pro is a non-destructive, nonlinear editing program. And let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, what you see here is my media drive. It's called Demo Drive, and I've got a project called Demo. And notice that this is a Premiere Pro project file, .prproj. And it's got the Premiere Pro icon, and it's small. This one's really small because it's mostly empty, but these don't get too big, maybe 100 gigs, or not 100 gigs, 100K, something like that, the size of a Microsoft Word document. And then separate, I have this media folder, and this one is set up, organized by 2 different resolutions. And this has my actual media files, the actual bits, clips, bits of video that I'll be editing with. And the point of a non-destructive program is the media is never touched. So when you make decisions about editing, cut here, lower the volume, change this clip to black and white, what have you, you're not affecting the actual media. Those are simply instructions that are saved in the project file. So there's a couple implications to that. One is that these are not changed, and at the beginning of a project or every time you bring new media into a project, if you also copy it to a second drive, you have a really effective backup because that's not changing. But if the main editing drive were ever to go down or get eaten by your dog or whatever, you would want to have a backup of that. But then while you're doing work, when you come into the editing room or on your laptop and you spend 3 or 4 hours doing something, making decisions, those decisions are all being recorded here in the demo project. So if you use something like Time Machine or Dropbox to back up files, you'd want to back this one up frequently. And if you're editing in the lab, periodically, or when you leave, you might just want to throw it up on the Google Drive or email it to yourself or something just to save a backup of that, because that's where your decisions are. Okay, so a non-destructive, non-linear editing program. Let's look at the interface a little more. So when we look at Premiere Pro, the second point I want to make is to recognize the 4 basic windows and understand what they do. So the first one is the project panel. And for basics, this is just where you store your stuff. So you see, we've already imported. In fact, I have a separate video about importing this footage, and it's organized into folders. You can rename here. It's basically your filing cabinet where you store everything getting ready to edit. The next one is the source viewer. And if you double click something here, you see that it opens in the source viewer, and there's a strong connection between the project panel and the source viewer, because the source viewer is always looking at just one piece of media. It's a way to look deeply at one piece of media, see what's in it. You can even look at the audio tracks, things like this. And often what we're doing is marking an in and an out to decide what portion of our footage we're going to use. And then we often bring it down to the timeline, something like that. So then the timeline is where we literally construct our stories. This is where we do the storytelling. These are the clips exist down here. You have video and audio separated by this double line. You can edit them. You can move them around. The timeline is where we do the storytelling. And so then finally, in the program viewer, that's where we play back our work. So just like the source viewer is connected to the project panel, it plays one at a time. The program viewer is always playing the timeline. It's always seeing what we're laying down on the timeline. And you'll notice too, these playheads. This is called a playhead, that's called a playhead. But these two playheads are linked. You see, when I move one, I move the other. Or if I push play here, we also play forward on the timeline. Okay, so do get used to the four main windows, but don't be overly attached to exactly how they're laid out. Because the third point I want to make is that Premiere Pro has a customizable interface. So if you reach a point where you just, you're sort of done with this part and you just want a lot more looking at what you're doing, do this sort of thing. If you reach a point where you really have to do detailed work on the timeline, same thing. You can build out more space. So very customizable. And up across the top here, you see these are what are called workspaces. So we're in the editing workspace. It's just more of the same. If I drop down here, I can reset to the saved layout. That's the original editing workspace. But there are also other workspaces. Assembly is designed for that first assembly to look at more of the clips, be able to drag things from there directly, things of that nature. One more thing here, and it's really useful, and it's a customization using what's called the tilde key. It's a little button right above your tab. Take a close look at it there. So anytime you hit this, it'll make any window go full screen, and it's whatever you're just hovering over. So if I'm down here and I'm getting really close on the timeline, I just need more space to work temporarily, I hit the tilde and timeline goes full screen. Same thing, if I'm ready to play back and I don't want to be distracted by the timeline, I want to watch my work in progress as if it were a movie, taking up the whole screen, I can hit tilde and it goes wide. So tilde is part of that customization that I think is really valuable. The final point I want to make here is that part of having a deep program is there's lots of options, and almost anything you'd want to do in Premiere Pro, you can do in 3 or 4 ways. And that's both a strength and sometimes can be confusing. But don't worry about it. The goal is not to learn every way to do everything. The goal is to find ways you like to do things. So let me just give you an example. We looked at another video, we imported footage with a drag drop. But if I were to right click, I also have a choice right there to import. This is what's called a contextual menu. Right clicking here in the project panel gives me different choices than right clicking here on a clip, let's say. And I would also have a menu item, right, under File, Import, and I have a keyboard shortcut. So lots of ways to do the same thing. I made a quick edit. I marked in and out. I marked them with these buttons. They also have shortcuts, I and O. I dragged a piece of footage down to the timeline, but I also have buttons down here to overwrite or insert the footage. And then each of those has a keyboard shortcut. So I can push this and it makes an edit, or I can push the period and it makes an edit. So don't let this throw you off. Find ways that you like to work and don't be afraid of experimenting. A lot of people, as they improve through software, they start using the mouse a lot, and then they learn more keyboard shortcuts and they get faster by punching keys to do shortcuts. But you don't have to. It's really what you like. The only point is to dive in and not be overwhelmed by the choices. So yes, do dive in. It's 1, a non-destructive, nonlinear editing program. 2, there's almost always 4 main windows: project, source, program, timeline. 3, it's customizable, so don't get too hung up on exactly how everything looks. And 3, there's lots of ways to do everything. So find things that you're comfortable with rather than trying to do everything all the time. So yeah, do dive in. Don't be intimidated. Remember these 4 things. First, it's a non-destructive program. It's not going to do any damage to your media, your footage, or your photographs. You can always undo. It's not even changing that stuff. 2, the 4 main windows. That's the project panel, the source viewer, the program viewer, and the timeline. Know what each of these windows does and what it's sort of about, and you can figure out a lot of stuff. 3, it's a customizable interface. If you need more space somewhere, you can hit the tilde key and go full screen. You can drag the windows. You can look at different workspaces. It's plastic. And finally, there's more than one way to do everything. Don't get hung up on learning every shortcut right away or thinking there must be a faster way. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but just start figuring things out. You'll naturally get faster. Okay, have fun.